All right, so Mike, first thing I want to do before we even get started is just say thanks for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to meet you and look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, you are actually involved with and into everything that I am, so this should be very interesting. But I got to ask this first, just because it's like a chicken or the egg thing. So, like, what came first for you, the horror or the metal?
The horror, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad was a huge horror fan, and so at home it was always whatever movies were on Sunday. We'd watch the old Universal films, and my dad was a huge Hammer House of Horror
Mm.
fan, so he would always be watching those at home whenever they'd come on. So like Curse of Frankenstein was his favorite movie of all time. So he'd be watching that, and of course I'd see it, and then I get exposed to the whole thing. So I got involved very early on, probably as early as maybe like the late '70s, and then in the '80s, of course, once VHS was available, then it was just end of story. I was just what just renting on Dollar Day at the video store on Sundays. I'd be renting 5 horror movies every single week and just
Oh
binging.
wow.
So yeah, yeah. So like early mid '80s is when it really took off for me. And then for metal, it didn't really. I wasn't like a much of a music fan
Mhm.
until maybe the '90s. In the '80s, I was kind of getting into it. I think the first soundtrack I bought was like the Lost Boys soundtrack,
Mm.
and then I started buying scores to a lot of films, like the Elm Street films, buying the scores and then buying the soundtracks, and I got exposed to a lot of music there. But didn't really get into metal until maybe like the early to mid '90s.
Oh wow. Okay, cool. But it sounds to me like you started off in horror movies with all of the classics, which is the best way to do it.
Hmm.
And much like myself, I heard you drop like the Hammer horror and the Universal, and those are still my favorites. Like no
Hmm.
matter how many movies have come out since then, it's like you got to go back and watch those classics from the 50s, 60s, and even prior to that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, it's good. It's good too because it's of course, especially if you're a little kid, you don't want to be exposed to the really hardcore you know type of horror right away. You want to kind of gradually get into it. So watching the original Dracula, Frankenstein is sort of a good warm up to not be traumatized. Like, okay, maybe a little spooky. You're not used to it and everything, but jumping straight into even just the scarier stuff like The Exorcist at a very early age is kind of rough. And I definitely saw it very earlier than I needed to, but and it was a TV version, so it wasn't as brutal.
Hmm.
But yeah, definitely getting started on the milder stuff is the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think The Exorcist is still one of the scariest movies of all time, in my opinion, too.
It's
So
terrifying, yeah, absolutely one of the scariest films ever made.
So, for my listeners who are not familiar, the reason I started with that question is because of your documentary, "The History of Metal and Horror." And so you said horror came first. You got into metal like late '80s, early '90s. So when did did one kind of trigger the other? Like, oh, I love horror movies, and these soundtracks are so good that now I like metal music. Is that what happened?
Kinda a little bit like that, yeah. It was I wasn't just a big music fan in general, outside of horror film scores, which is what I was really into at that time. Musically, I didn't really get into, even just, I mean, I was like a big Prince fan in the '80s, right? That was like, towards I think the Batman soundtrack was the first one. My dad was a huge Prince fan too. I think he had a huge influence on, in every aspect of the entertainment that I was into. Not metal though. He definitely didn't like metal, but yeah, so I was like a big Prince fan, and then my cousin guy was a huge metal fan in the '80s, so he was always
Hmm.
listening to Metallica and Anthrax and and Slayer and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really get it at that time,
Hmm.
and then he started introducing me to grunge, and I got into Nirvana and those kind of bands. And then I think that was sort of my warm up for the heavier type of stuff, and then I started catching up on the Metallica and the Slayer and the Anthrax and all that stuff.
Okay.
And then I kind of became a metalhead, throughout the '90s into the early 2000s. So it was kind of a slow process, but that's all kind of how it started. So I really credit my cousin Peter from Finland, where we used to go to every summer, uh, for introducing me to basically. I wouldn't be into metal if not for him. I think he got me into it.
So where do you get the idea like, okay, I'm gonna make a documentary, I'm gonna put these things together. And by the way, I have seen the documentary and it's absolutely phenomenal. So anybody who hasn't yet seen it, please see it because it's seriously so good. I couldn't stop.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, well, basically, the backstory is I had worked for the Howard Stern show for about 8 years,
Mhm.
and I was working for his TV department, and through there became really good friends with Richard Christie, who of course loves metal and horror, and he's heavily involved in both. He has a band, Charred Walls of the Damned, so I shot two music videos for him. He connected me with a guy named Sean McEwen, who brought me on board to shoot, co-direct, and edit a music video for Fozzy. So I started kind of building these relationships early on. Then Richard introduced me to my now friend and producer on the documentary, Rob Lucas, who was also very very heavily involved in the horror scene, mostly, but also the metal scene as well. So like Tom Savini's his best friend.
Mhm.
He's friends with all those guys. He ran the convention circuit for years, so he's just got the best relationship with Doug Bradley and Kane Hodder and all those guys.
Yeah.
So he's also pretty friendly with Kirk Hammett from Metallica, and Kirk was putting on his own horror convention in 2014 called Kirk Hammett's Fear Fest Evil. So what he wanted to do was put together a show that combined his two favorite things, which were metal and horror. So he invited all of his metal friends and all of his horror friends and people that he idolized, and he put on this amazing show for a weekend where it brought everything together. And there were live bands performing and just like horror everywhere, panels and artwork and displays. So after the weekend, I realized that there was this. Obviously, we know that there's a strong connection between metal and horror for years,
Mhm.
but no one's made a documentary on it yet. So I figured, well, you know what? With all the people that we know, it's probably wouldn't be too hard to actually start filming some interviews and putting together a documentary. So that's kind of how it all came about. And so we started to put together a list of all the people we wanted to interview, and of course, we started with the people that we already knew because we could just make a phone call and get them to be involved with it, or go to the convention floor and just like go from table to table and tell them what we were doing. Chris Jericho was my first interview because I already knew him from shooting the Fozzy video.
Mhm.
So went from there, and then it was just like interview after interview after interview, and then of course, once I got people like Alice Cooper involved, then it went crazy from there. Then so many different artists wanted to be involved with it, and next thing you know, I have about 65 interviews in the documentary.
Wow.
So yeah, that's basically the story of it.
And there's some pretty amazing people that you've interviewed, and some of them have actually been on my show as well, Wednesday 13 and
Mhm.
Michael Berryman, and I the first thing you just name dropped Chris Jericho, so now I need to like navigate into that. As a guy who's a metalhead making rock music and is a pro wrestler like myself, I immediately hear Jericho and I'm like, okay, so were you a wrestling fan or is this all directly linked to Fozzy?
It was all Fozzy. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I enjoyed the wrestling again, like in the '80s with Hulk Hogan and Andre and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. I didn't really get into it. I didn't keep up with it after that. But yeah, with Chris, it was through Fozzy. Basically, that's how the relationship started, and that's how we were able to keep in touch. So I saw that his band was performing at the Gramercy in Manhattan, and I said, hey, we're local. I'd love to come down and shoot your interview for this thing. He was totally down with it, and that's how it happened. So, yeah, so him and
That's
we've been in touch over the years, and he interviewed me on his podcast, and that's one of the great things about having worked on this is sort of developing these friendships
mhm.
with a lot of people that I really admire. So, yeah,
So before we keep talking about these different things here, can we just let everybody know where they could watch the documentary?
yeah. I mean, the quickest way to get all the information is to go to metalhorror.com. And then you'll find links to where you can buy it. Of course, if you buy it directly, I make more money, so I would definitely recommend everyone do that. But yeah, so I have it on DVD, Blu-ray. I have the brand new 4 disc deluxe edition, which came out this year, that has the original Blu-ray soundtrack disc from the band Knights of the Black, who provided the soundtrack to the film,
Mhm.
and two extra Blu-ray discs that have over 20 hours of interview footage that didn't make the original cut, and a booklet and a nice magnetic box and everything. So that's only available on my site right now. But
Mhm.
it's also available on streaming. It's on Vimeo. It's on Amazon. It's pretty much wherever you can find it. And I also just released on Vimeo. Every complete interview is now available to stream as well. So if you know, in the documentary, I have maybe a full minute or two of Alice
Mhm.
Cooper's interview, but I interviewed him for about 45 minutes. So why wait? Why let all that interview go to waste? So they can get in the deluxe edition, or they can go on the Vimeo page and just rent that one particular interview, or rent the whole set, or whatever they like to do. So everything's now out there and available. So no bit of material from any interview went to waste at all.
So, with all these people that you interviewed, I believe you said about 65 interviews. Um, is there anybody who you talked to that you maybe didn't hear about beforehand or weren't that big of a fan of, but now after talking to them, you're like, oh my God, I checked out their music and they're really great?
Yeah, yeah. Perfect example would be Ghost.
Mm,
I wasn't too familiar with Ghost at that time. I don't remember it might have been like 2015 or so. And I mean, they were doing pretty good big shows at that time, so they had a fan base. They had been around for a bit, but I wasn't too familiar with them. And then I think it was Bill Philpott, who does a lot of conventions. He was working with the band when they were in LA. Helped them out with some tour stuff, and he mentioned that he was going to be at the show, and
mhm,
he suggested I come down and do an interview with Tobias. And I wasn't really familiar, too much, but then I kind of, did some research, of course, before the interview, and I was like, wow, these guys are pretty cool. So we did the interview. Tobias was fantastic. We had to call him Nameless School at the time. I had to credit him that way in the documentary, because at that time, they wanted to keep the big mystery going. They didn't want,
mhm,
they didn't want people to know. So Tobias was wearing the regular, one of the Nameless School masks and everything, so you couldn't really tell. But all the fans who knew him knew who it was once they heard
mhm.
his voice and everything. So he was awesome, great to talk to. And then I stayed to watch the performance in LA, and I was just blown away. And then I became a Ghost fan ever since. So that would definitely be an example of a band that I wasn't familiar with that I definitely followed after the fact.
Now, keeping in theme of the documentary here still for a minute. When I was a kid, I remember thinking how cool it was to hear like Dokken doing Dream Warriors or Alice Cooper from Friday the 13th Part 6. Is there a certain song or band that you really got into because you heard them in a movie?
Probably got more into Alice Cooper, from Friday 13th Part 6. Uh, yeah, I did. The songs that were in there always stuck in my head, and I
Mhm,
think I became more familiar with Alice after watching that. So, but yeah, and Dokken, from Elm Street 3 and everything. I'm sure there's more. I'll probably think of some more along the way, but yeah, those are some examples.
Yeah, it seemed that even into the late '90s, when you're talking like Scream 2 and 3 and those kind of soundtracks, that's when you started to see those new metal bands really like being these soundtracks from start to finish. You're looking at like Korn and Slipknot and Wednesday 13 and bands like that that are coming along. So it really never metal and horror really never separated. Like it
Mhm.
started so long ago and it actually started growing the more time went on. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, the if you watch the film, we cover sort of Delhausen is a writer, and he did an amazing job just doing his own research and bringing a lot of history of the early connection. So there's like a film called Terror on Tour, which was probably like the first metal horror film, which came out in 1980, I believe. And then after that, there was a couple of more Alice Cooper, Monster Dog. There was of course Trick or Treat, which is like the biggest like metal
Yeah.
and horror film ever, which everyone still remembers. And we have a special segment in the documentary just kind of talking about that because it was so important. But yeah, those were the films that kind of started it early on, and then it was always there. I mean, because it
Mhm.
just metal just worked so well with aggressive horror films, and you got to be careful with it. I mean, you could definitely overdo it. You could
Mhm.
put in a lot of metal into a horror film where it doesn't really fit, and it takes away from the sort of the mood of it,
Yeah.
of the horror itself. So it's got to be done in a way that it kind of makes sense. So it's not just if it fits, if the horror film actually has sort of like a metal vibe to it, or um, like a film like Deathgasm that's sort of made to have a metal element to it. It makes total sense. And it gets if it's a little silly, then yeah, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
but you wouldn't want to put necessarily like a metal soundtrack over like The Exorcist or something. It didn't, wouldn't work that way.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Now, my next question is about, so you mentioned in the '80s how you got, really into it with, VHS and all that, and something that happened in the '80s was the big satanic panic when it came
Mhm.
to metal music and things like that. I think that only helped to fuel metal being involved in horror movies, and almost made it kind of the reverse effect. It kind of made metal even come into the mainstream a little bit more. Do you think you would agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's whenever you start banning stuff, whenever you start putting warning labels on things, it just, makes sales start to spike because people, people especially want that. Whenever there was a clean version of an album or an explicit version, everyone always put the explicit version. No one wants a clean album. So it's the same with horror. Everyone wants the most uncut version that you can get because you want to see everything. So yeah, so there was this sort of camaraderie between metal and horror fans where they wanted the most extreme stuff. They didn't want to be told no. And
Mhm.
if they were, then it was like, oh, well, I really got to check it out because there's got to be a reason why they're keeping it from us. And that
Right.
freaked people out. So that's why you started getting warning labels on things and you started getting the satanic panic stuff. And in
Mhm.
the UK, they had the video nasty thing where like all these horror films like Evil Dead were just banned. I mean, you couldn't even find it.
Yeah.
If you were lucky to get it, get a copy somewhere, it's like, oh my god, I got a copy of Evil Dead. Now it's like you're struggling to find Evil Dead. Like what? That doesn't even make any sense, right?
Right,
So you
right.
can just find everything online or whatever you want to watch, whatever you want. It's just like there. But
Yeah.
back in those days, and that was kind of exciting in a way to have something that was just so forbidden, that you had to kind of seek it out in a way. Uh,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we keep talking about metal, 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 but I got to ask this too because there are different genres of metal, and I'm a huge hair metal guy. I know Chris Jericho is too. Are you also into the hair metal scene, or are you leaning more towards the Slayers and the Metallicas and the Anthrax?
Yeah, little bit more into the non-hair metal bands.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's music from like so many bands that I love no matter what. I mean, I would even say Guns N' Roses could be considered like a hair metal
Mhm.
band. Back in the '80s.
Yeah.
I like Guns N' Roses. I like their kind of stuff. And even yeah, I mean, there are tons of bands that were around that were hair metal bands that have some songs that I like.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd be more into the thrash, kind of metal bands from that era.
Okay. So who, if I asked you, would be your Mount Rushmore of those type of metal bands?
I mean, the classic, it's you always kind of go back to the classics like Metallica and Slayer. I mean, I think they were just so influential, and even to see them today. I mean, I'll go to a Metallica show today and just still be blown away, by their songs from Who the Bell Tolls. Still like my favorite Metallica track, and whenever they
Mm.
play that, it's just like just amazing, amazing to hear it. If I go to a Slayer show, which of course I haven't done in years, but just that raw energy, that power, of them, these guys still playing songs that they've been playing for so many years,
Mhm.
is just amazing. So yeah, all of those bands, Sabbath, I love early Sabbath stuff, of course, and those guys really invented the metal genre in a way, and brought a lot of horror into the music that influenced so many bands after that. I
Mhm.
love early Maiden stuff. Like the first two albums are my favorite. So yeah, I think, and I've discovered a lot of stuff along the way, especially working on this film with people that I've interviewed. I was like, all right, let me go back and kind of check this out. Let me check out a little bit more Megadeth. Maybe I wasn't as big of a Megadeth fan back in the day, but now I'm like, oh yeah, Megadeth's got a lot of amazing songs. Now I'm kind of like a Megadeth fan too. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, this question might even be a little bit tougher for you, but how about a Mount Rushmore of horror movies?
Yeah, it's I put horror films in sort of like different kinds of categories because you have the classics, the same as like Metallica and Slayer would be the classic metal bands for me. It's the same as most people would say it would be, The Shining, The Exorcist, those types of films because they were so well made. I mean, not only were they scary, but just cinematography was fantastic. The environment was amazing. They're just like I would say those are like perfect horror films, where you can't
Mhm.
really point to it and say, "Oh, that was stupid" or "That sucked" or whatever. It's like from beginning to end, like they're amazing.
Mhm.
Um, And then there's like more obscure stuff. I was talk about some of the even with John Carpenter films. It's like outside of Halloween. I love the Halloween series, the
Mhm.
early one, and of course Prince of Darkness, The Thing. Those are classics, of course. But I even get a little bit more abstract with In the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite horror films, and not a lot of people know about it. It didn't really make it as big as some of the other ones, but for me, I love that sort of theme of I'm a huge like fan of surrealism. So David Lynch is probably my favorite director of all time, and
Oh, okay.
I got to spend some time with him over the years, which was great. But any kind of horror film that has surrealism in it is really something I like a lot. So I think In the Mouth of Madness had some of that kind of like distortion of reality where as the film goes on, we lose more sense of like what's real and what's not, and reality gets distorted. And I love that kind of theme to a horror film. So
Mhm.
I'd eventually like to make more stuff like that, more narrative films myself.
Well, let's stay on that topic for a second, as far as your career in general, because you do have a lot of credits under your name. And when did you realize that you wanted to even be involved in show business, movies, writing, directing, producing, anything like that? Like, when did it hit you? Like, this is what I want to do.
When I was 13, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, we in my junior high school in the Bronx, we were very lucky to have a an art program that had animation in it. So they taught us pixelation and claymation. So those that was the first time that I really got to play around with that type of stuff. And then me and my two friends, we created some like really wild, crazy stuff. Like I think our big project for the class was a claymation of Bart Simpson killing Freddy Krueger and Jason or something like that. Uh, so it was very bloody. It was wild and crazy, and I think that was the first time that I really got into creating the stuff and not just being a fan of it. I was a fan at that point already,
Mhm.
but that was something I was really into, and probably around the same time is actually when I was doing special effects makeup um, in junior high. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I started doing that really early on, and that was actually my first career choice of what I wanted to do. I wanted to get in special effects. I was a huge Tom Savini fan. He was my guy. I'd wait in line, forever to get an autograph, and now him and I friends were getting sandwiches at Katz's Deli in Manhattan. So
Yeah.
that's another crazy thing. But yeah, so I was a big special effects guy. I was bringing in all kinds of like bloody stuff to class. I think on Valentine's Day and ninth grade, I brought in a Valentine's Day chocolate box, and I'd have the girls open it up, and there'd be a bloody beating heart inside. So I was that kid, and that's what I was into. But yeah, so I did that. I did the animation, and then in high school, they actually had an amazing program at John F. Kennedy in the Bronx. Also,
Mhm.
they had you know video production classes, so I got to learn some about lighting and cameras, regular film production class, and also horror film history class, which was
Oh, wow.
unheard of. Especially you'd never think they would have something like that in the Bronx, especially like a horror film history class. But they did, and of course, I aced everything. The teacher would ask the class questions about, "Hey, so what movie did this and that happen?" And my hand was just up all the time. I was like, "I know this, I know that." It was so easy for me, and I loved it because it was everything that I was into. So but yeah, so in high school, then I really started getting into writing. The teacher started having me write scripts for the final film classes, and I was writing comedy, so I did like this comedy Terminator film.
Mm,
T2 was big at that time, so I did kind of a spoof on that. And then in college, of course, is when I really got into more production, like learning it on a
mhm,
more professional level. Did the college thing, and then got into the field and started just freelancing and working here and there, and eventually getting the job at the Stern Show,
mhm.
which really helped make things take off. At that point.
So where do you go from there? You get the job with Howard Stern, and then where does your career take you after that? What was the next door that opens?
So after that show ended in 2013. Howard didn't want to do the TV thing anymore, so he's like, "All right, bye bye Howard TV," and that was the end of that. So, but it also started happening around the time when, when I met Rob Lucas,
Mhm.
my friend who kind of really brought me into the business, and him and I first really started talking at the Metallica show at the Apollo, which my friend Richard Christie got me a ticket to. So that was amazing. And that's when we really started talking. And he told me that he was working on a Tom Savini documentary, and they could
Mm.
use an extra hand if I want to come on do camera work. I was like, yeah, of course. That's how the relationship with Tom started growing, and then it just kind of took off from there. Then the documentary happened, and then Rob brought me on board to do camera work and edit two of John Carpenter's music videos a couple of years back.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and I got to work with John Carpenter. I mean, how crazy is that, right?
Wow.
At the same time, I was also working with the David Lynch Foundation. They teach transcendental meditation, and I was actually working on trying to get David booked as a guest on the Stern Show because Howard also meditates.
Mhm.
The interview didn't happen, but I did manage to get Howard to speak at the David Lynch Foundation's event at Radio City
Mhm.
back in 2009. So that was like a huge thing for them because once Howard started talking about TM on his show, their phones just blew up, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, Howard is into this! Like he's cynical about everything, but if he's into it, it's got to be legit." So they had a
Wow.
huge influx of people wanting to do TM once Howard got involved, and because of that, I got in their good graces, and I still do work for them to this very day. But yeah, they got me to spend some time with David Lynch, my favorite director of all time, and I got to
Wow.
go to his house, spent some time with him there to just hang out and everything. That was awesome, and that was an amazing experience because when I just had the address, and I drove to the house, and I pull up, and I'm looking around. I was like, "This is the house from Lost Highway. Holy shit!"
Oh, wow.
you know. So he had bought that house, and then he bought the house next to it. So the Lost Highway house he turned mostly into like a recording studio. So you go in
Mhm.
there, and it's like all audio recording stuff and everything. And then he kind of lived in the house next door, and he had his art studio and everything. So that was amazing. That was an amazing thing. So yeah, so a lot of these things started kind of branching out, but
Okay.
it all came from the Stern Show. Without the Stern Show, like none of this would have happened. I don't know where I'd be right now.
Wow.
But yeah, that's kind of where it happened. And yeah, now I'm still building relationships. I'm still coming up with different ideas for shows and other
Mhm.
projects that I want to do. So I'm still kind of holding on to those relationships that I made over the years to try to branch out into even more stuff.
Now, are there any project or project ideas that you have that you could tell us about? I don't want you to spoil anything that you're not ready to talk about, but if there is something that you'd like to throw out there, could we hear about it?
That's a good question. There are two TV shows type projects that I'm working on right now. Can't really talk about it yet. Uh, nothing concrete, so I don't want to jinx it.
Mhm.
But I do have people involved who want to work on it with me. So I think once we actually get stuff shot, then I can probably talk about it at that point.
Okay.
Beyond that, yeah, I mean, I'm always writing. I'm writing a new screenplay right now. So I'd like to hopefully get that into production at some point.
Mhm.
And yeah, well, I mean, one thing I probably can talk about, since we actually signed a deal for next year, we're actually going to be releasing a coffee table book on the history of metal and horror. Um, so, company reached out. They've done books for Savini, Kane Hodder, uh, AM Inc. They reached out and said that they loved the artwork and the documentary and everything. They want to do a coffee table book. So
Wow.
within the next year, we're going to be working on the coffee table book, which is
That's
yeah,
that's cool.
which is something I'm very excited about because the stuff they put together is amazing. They did a coffee table book for the In Search of Darkness series, which
Hmm.
looks fantastic, very thorough, amazing artwork, hardcover books and everything. So yeah, so that's something we just signed a deal on. So I guess I could technically talk about it,
Oh, that's
and
excellent.
so sometime next year that should be released. So yeah.
Do you ever go out to like horror conventions, stuff like that, to promote and like sell the Blu-rays and the DVDs and all that stuff?
Yeah, I've done a few over the last 2 years. So yeah, I've done shows in Connecticut, and Jersey, New York, pretty much mostly local. It's kind of hard to travel these days, especially
Mhm.
with wife and two kids at home. It's hard to get away for full weekends, especially with the 2-year-old running around tearing the place apart. So it's
I'm
kind of late.
sure.
But if it's local, I mean, we just did one. I moved out to Long Island in August, so they had a convention out here a couple of months ago. So that was easy because I was able to just be there in 20 minutes, do a show, come back, at the end of the night, and do the same thing for 2 days. So I'll do some shows. I've sold the DVDs and Blu-rays and posters and everything at a couple of shows. I'll probably put that on hold. I think until the book comes out,
Mhm.
because then I'll have a new product that I can sell. So yeah, conventions are tough. I mean, it's some are kind of hit or miss. You never know how good they're going to be and how much money you're going to make and stuff. So
Mhm.
I try not to do too many unless I'm really sure that I'm going to kind of at least at the very least break even and make some good contacts while I'm there.
Right.
Because there've been some shows that were like total losses just because the attendance wasn't that good or the networking opportunities weren't great. So I've been very selective, but yeah, I've done a couple, and it's a lot of fun. I love seeing friends. I love seeing people that I've interviewed in the film, like give them copies and all
Mm.
that stuff.
That's awesome. And here's just like a dream question for you. If you could go back in time and you could produce one horror movie that already exists, which one would you pick?
Hmm. Um. Wow. I don't know. Maybe Eraserhead. I think I'd love
Oh,
to be involved with that. And a
I
lot
d-
of people don't necessarily think that that's a horror film, but if you really watch it, like that's a scary movie. There's some creepy stuff going on in that movie. So I
yeah.
would definitely put that in the horror, the horror genre, and to be able to be on that kind of set,
Mhm.
watching David work and just kind of being part of that whole scene that would be something I'd love to do.
All the horror movie actors or horror movie fans that I've had on this podcast, and nobody has ever brought that movie up. You're the first one.
Yeah, every now and then someone will say it's like, yeah, Eraserhead. Yeah, of course it's a horror film. Like that's
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's a really, I mean, it's twisted, it's dark, there's some very creepy moments in there. I mean, really, it's like a nightmare. The whole movie is just a nightmare.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
yeah, so some of his other films, Wild at Heart, I wouldn't call it a horror film, but yeah, I mean, even Blue Velvet has some like really creepy scenes in there. There's I spoke to Scott Ian about. He's a huge David Lynch fan and a huge fan of Blue Velvet, and in the middle of our interview that I was shooting for the doc,
Mhm.
we start talking about. He brought it up in the film, and kind of like off camera, we're talking about it. We're still rolling, so I actually kept that part of our conversation in the bonus complete interview that everyone can watch, where we're kind of like I'm off camera, we're talking about Blue Velvet and talking about this one particular scene that was just like towards the end of the movie that's just like really creepy and just like really almost like a nightmare,
Yeah.
in the whole crime scene towards the end. So yeah, so when you really think about it, there's some stuff in there that's David Lynch just created some real horror stuff. I mean, Twin Peaks, some of those
Yeah.
episodes, especially in the last season, episode 8, which is probably one of the most famous, the black and white episode. Like there's some horror in there for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, Mulholland Drive, like there's one terrifying shot in that movie that everyone kind of like, you'll find it online. People are just sharing that one scene with it, the creepy person kind of comes from behind the fence, when this
Mhm.
guy's talking about this nightmare he had. So yeah, that's a lot of horror in Lynch's films. But
Yeah.
if you go back to his early short films, like the grandmother and some of the early, I mean, those are like even more terrifying. Like those are really really scary, type of films. So yeah, I think horror definitely influenced him a lot, early on.
I love the debates over what's horror movies and what isn't, especially when you go to like conventions and things like that.
Mhm.
And there's always like certain T-shirts, like Twin Peaks is always represented, or
Yeah,
like Jaws, and people are like, Jaws is not a horror movie. Yes, it is.
yeah, it is.
Like it
Of course it
absolutely
is.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be this very, specific formula. It's like, "Oh, you have to follow this formula. It has to, like, have this kinda look to it." It's like, no, sharks are freaking scary, man,
Oh yeah,
you're out in the water, you lose a limb, you lose, body parts. I mean, that's horror. That's terrifying.
yeah.
So,
It might be more horror than other things because it's real.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, how many
You
people,
know?
are afraid to go in the ocean? Charlie Benante talks about that a lot in the film too. It's like he was scared to go in the pool, just like a regular swimming pool, because just remembering what happened in the movie was just like
Mhm.
absolutely terrifying. And I'll think of it too. I might be even in a lake, where maybe I'm like swimming at night or something like that. And I can't see my feet, and I'm like, man, something horrific could definitely happen here.
Yep.
You're just kind of thinking about it, in the back of your mind, because of a lot of stuff that you've seen in horror films and in real life, real stories
Yeah.
of people getting hurt or killed. And so yeah, I mean, horror films, it's really just about how it makes you feel. If
Mhm.
you feel horrified by something in the film, and if there's a good amount of it throughout the film, then yeah, like, why not classify that as a horror film?
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So now the next part of this interview is the part that doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Mhm.
This is just our lightning round where we ask you a series of random questions. And that's really all it comes down to is just people getting to know you on a different level. So
Okay.
the first question in the lightning round is always, do you prefer Chicago or New York style pizza?
I'm partial to New York. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been here almost 50 years. I know where the good spots are. I grew up with it. I know what I like, and yeah, Chicago's good though. I've been out there. I've had their deep dish pizzas. They're great. I have no problem. But
Yeah.
if I had to choose one for the rest of my life, I'd still stick with New York.
All right. So do you prefer dinner or dessert?
Dinner. I'm not actually a huge dessert person, because I just try to keep the sugars a little bit low. So I like to have a nice, healthy but delicious dinner.
All right. So this next question may not matter to you very much then because it's chocolate or vanilla.
Most of the time, chocolate.
All right. How about do you prefer Ozzy or Alice Cooper?
Hmm. Uh, wow. Good question. Probably more of an Ozzy fan, just because I love Black Sabbath as a band.
Mm.
I love his voice, his style, his solo stuff. I probably like more Sabbath and Ozzy songs, than Alice Cooper. But of course, I love Alice too. I love his music. I love what he brought to the genre, his stage performance, and I love him personally. I think he's just an amazing human being. I've met Ozzy once briefly, but didn't really
Mm.
get to spend time with him the way that Alice. So I like them for different reasons. But musically, if I had to kind of stick with one music collection, I'd probably stick with Ozzy.
That's fair. And the next one will be you have three choices. Is it going to be Metallica, Anthrax, or Slayer?
I'd still go with Metallica.
Yeah,
Yeah.
classic. I mean, they're classic.
Yeah, they just have so many songs. Yeah, I mean, just their entire '80s catalog, of course, is can't beat it. But yeah, as far as just the amount of songs that I could keep listening to, yeah, then I'd probably stick with Metallica.
So this next question is a classic horror nerd question. So there's really no wrong answer. Is it going to be Friday the 13th or Halloween?
Wow. The original Friday 13th.
Yes.
I'll go with Halloween. Um, yeah, I like them both a lot for different reasons, but I would say, because Friday 13th series had so many great installments. I mean, probably
Yeah.
part 4 and part 6, would be sort of like my favorites. The first one, I liked it, but I think I liked the first Halloween more.
When you were talking earlier about perfect horror movies, I always think of Halloween.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for me, I think it's close. There's some things in there. I mean, you can spot a couple of issues. Like when Michael Myers hits the glass, and you can see like there's a hammer or something like that, and it's like
Yeah.
once you kind of know it's there, and it's like, oh, you got the thing there, like that, whatever. Then you can't forget about it. Then you
Yeah.
keep thinking about that. You had like a couple of technical issues that were oversights or whatever. And one thing that kind of always bothered me about the film is the fact that we see Michael Myers' face towards the
Mhm.
end. I always felt like that sort of just you know went against the whole idea of this mysterious
Mm,
figure behind a mask. I think, once you show the face, like, the mystery's gone.
mm.
And I don't really understand the decision. I'm sure it's explained somewhere, but I would have appreciated the film more not knowing at all what Michael Myers looked like. I think, and throughout the entire series, I would never not want to know what this looked like, because I think that mystery just makes it that much scarier. And once you see a face, that's kind of like, oh, it's just a guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now it's like, now you're thinking about it like through the movie. It's like, oh, I know what he looks like behind the mask, and it's not. His face really isn't scary. So that whole element of the mystery and the fear of what's behind that mask is kind of gone for me. So, I
Made
still
him
love
more
the movie.
human.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I
Mm.
love not knowing what he looked like, because then your mind is kind of like filling in the gaps.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of why I didn't really, and I love Rob Zombie, but I'm going to say this: I didn't really care for his Halloween remakes because I didn't like the backstory. I
Hmm.
didn't want to know why Michael was Michael. I just think that him being inherently evil is scarier than knowing that he had a shitty childhood.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, just same concept, but just more of a background in that one.
Yeah, and plus, like, the original Michael Myers, the kid in the first one, looks like a very nice kid.
Hmm.
Pleasant looking kid. Just something happened. He snapped, whatever, like, whatever it is. And the Rob Zombie version is like, he looks like a badass kid. He's like
Yeah.
got this attitude. He's got this look. Like, oh, you don't want to mess with that kid. So,
Yes.
so it's a totally different type of vibe. And I think Rob wanted to, like, fill in all these gaps and kind of take it his
Mhm.
own direction. Uh, I prefer what John Carpenter did with the films. No disrespect to Rob. I love Rob. He was great in my film and everything. But yeah, I'm not really crazy about the direction sort of that
Mhm.
he took in. I like elements of it. I think it was shot very well. I love
Yeah.
some of the scenes, the brutality, like the brutality of Michael Myers, and some of the scenes that were just like, there's that extra energy of brutality. I thought came into play very nicely at some points. But yeah, just trying to explain too much really just takes away from the mystique of the
Yeah.
character.
Absolutely. I kind of felt like it was almost Halloween combined with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I
Mhm.
feel like he gave Michael Myers the Texas Chainsaw family and, kind of put those elements together, which of course he's inspired by those things, so I could see
Yeah.
why. But just, the original just had that mystery of like this kid just was born with this evil inside of him is much scarier in my opinion.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, and Rob did House of a Thousand Corpses and
Hmm.
everything, so he was able to put that Texas Chainsaw kind of feel into a movie like that,
Yeah.
which made a lot of sense.
Yeah, fantastic movie by the way. Um, and my next question is a strange one, and I love the different answers I get for this one. So let's just say you're superstitious, you're going through the Bermuda Triangle. Are you taking a plane or are you taking a boat, and why?
Hmm. Um, I think I'm taking a plane. uh, yeah, if I were to be superstitious about it, there's something about being stuck in the water that is scary to me. I'd be less afraid of being flying overhead. I mean, I'm sure people say, well, there's all kinds of weird stuff going on with the fields and it brings the planes down, but I just feel like you have more maneuverability. Like, maybe you can get out of it a little bit, or where it's maybe you're in a ship, you're on sea, that maybe there's something sucking you in, or
Hmm.
something like that, messing you up, where you're kind of locked in there and you can't get out, then you get pulled under the water. So I think I'd still rather fly.
All
Good
right.
question though. That's a great question.
All right. So the last three lightning round questions are pretty basic, and they're pretty normal. But this is got to do this for fun. So favorite movie that's not horror, favorite TV show, and favorite cartoon.
Favorite film that's not horror. Really, really tough one. I mean, for the longest time, Scarface was my favorite
Mm,
movie of all time.
hmm.
I loved everything about that film. It's tough because, like, I watch it, like, that movie, I watched it so many times, and I still love it, but it's like one of those things I'll watch forever, then I'll kind of put off to the side,
Mm,
and then I'll get into something else. So it's really hard to say, like, what even what my current favorite film is. There will be stuff like I try to think of films that I can watch over and over and over again,
yeah.
not really get sick of them. But something like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's just, I love Hunter Thompson's writing. I love, Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro's performance in there. It's like hilarious, so well done, so entertaining. It's like just so much energy. That's something that I could watch. I could watch over and over again. So that might be in my top five at the very least. I'll say that.
That's a great choice. I love that.
Yeah. So if I and then I mean I read the book after the movie, so I'm kind of able to see these, these actors in those roles, and it kind of makes
Yeah.
reading the book a lot more fun too.
Yeah, I do that a lot. When I saw Interview with the Vampire and then I went and read the book,
Mhm.
all I could see in my head every time I was reading through it was Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt.
Yeah. Yeah, some people don't like to do it that way, but it was fun for me. I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So how about favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show? Let's see. Wow, because throughout different stages of my life, I had different favorites. I mean, early on, like Tales from the Dark Side was probably my favorite
Mm,
show when
mhm,
it was on TV. Now I look back on it, it's like, all right, yeah, it's okay. But thinking about modern stuff, something like shows I'm watching on Netflix, I would say shows like Dark. It's probably one of my favorite series of all time.
mm,
So yeah, I mean, if we're talking about that type of TV show, of like a Netflix, long form type of series, Dark would be up there. I think it was just brilliant and creepy and just so smart. It's just a fun show to watch. Um, Twin Peaks was another one. I
mhm,
especially love the last season
mhm,
that Lynch did a couple of years back. As far as other types of shows, not much right now. I mean, I was into Walking Dead in the first few
mm,
seasons.
mhm.
That was a fun show. Not much else right now, though. There's always something that comes up, which is great. But currently, I think I've kind of seen everything I wanted to see, and nothing else stands out right now.
Right now, I'm behind the times, and I'm just getting into Dexter, and
Yeah,
that's pretty great.
Dexter was great. Yeah, I meant to catch up on some of the new stuff after the show ended,
Mhm.
but yeah, I was a little late to Dexter, but then I went back and caught up. So yeah, I watched all the original series of Dexter, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm only halfway through. I think there's 8 seasons, and I'm about to finish the 4th one, but I'm way late to the party, but I'm like, "Man, for a horror guy, I should have watched this forever ago."
It's so hard, yeah, and it's so hard to go back. I mean, like, Breaking Bad is a show, one of my favorite shows also of all
Yeah.
time. I'm like, I'm so glad I got into that early and didn't have to go too far back, maybe like 2 seasons or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so hard when a show's been going on for years, then you're late to the game.
Yep.
Like, oh man, I gotta go back. And there are a couple of shows I still want to do that with, like I never really got into Lost when it was
Mm.
on.
Mhm.
Kind of wanted to go back into that, but then everyone's like, man, that show ended horribly, and I'm like, do I really want to invest my time in
Yeah.
a show that ends horribly?
Right. Right.
Yeah, so maybe I'll leave that alone for now, and try to catch us on some other stuff that that people were into a little bit more.
Yeah. Alright, so last lightning round question is favorite cartoon?
Favorite cartoon? I had my favorites when I was a kid, GI Joe, Transformers, all that type of stuff.
Mhm.
These days, not big on cartoons, but I still like Family Guy.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's smart, it's clever, it's up with the times. So that's probably like my favorite cartoon. I'm not really into like Japanese anime or any of that type of stuff. I like funny adult humored cartoons. So yeah, so I'd say like Family Guy is still a show that I'll watch, a cartoon that I'll watch. I can't really think of anything else. I might catch some stuff on Adult Swim, stuff that's
Mhm.
kind of like wild. Late at night, I might watch some animations there that are pretty fun. But yeah, so those kind of like come and go because those are just sort of like they're in for a little while, then they're out and stuff. But consistently, I see Family Guy is like probably my favorite.
All right. So before I get you out of here, I want you to plug your social media so everybody could follow you and see if you're doing any con appearances, see what your future projects are. And just one more time for everybody listening, please plug the documentary and where they could watch it and how they could support it.
Yeah. So the history of metal and horror is available at metalhorror.com. That's where you can find stuff to purchase and more information, the history, everyone involved, social media links and everything. But as far as Instagram, Facebook, at the Metal Horror is where you can find me. So you can just type that in and follow me there. So at the Metal Horror on socials, and metalhorror.com is the website. So you can get everything you need there, and yeah, keep up with news. I'll have any updates on other projects, especially projects that are related to metal and horror are going to stay there on that site and social media handles. So there'll be more updates along the way, especially with the book that'll be coming out sometime next year.
All right, very cool. So thank you again, Mike, for being here. This was so much fun, and like I said, I've watched it. It's absolutely incredible. And the list of people that pop on to talk about this when you're doing these interviews, I'm just like, wow, wow, wow. Like everybody keep like when I saw Wednesday 13, I was like, oh, perfect. Like
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So
Wednesday's great. Yeah, we actually we shot his interview twice. The first time, I forgot when it was, but it was on a tour bus, and I
mm,
always hate shooting interviews on a tour bus. Sometimes you just have no choice. It is what it is. You do it. I did a few of them. I did Corpse Grinder on his bus. I did Butcher
mm,
Babies on their bus, but you have to deal with the motor running. They can't turn that off or anything. So you have to in post. You have to like fix all the motors and all this type of stuff. So I ran into Wednesday again at the Cradle of Filth show
mm.
out here in Huntington on Long Island, and Wednesday was opening, and we started chatting. He's like, "Hey, man, do you mind if we redo my interview?" And I was like, "You know what? I would love to redo your interview. We have a nice quiet room over here. No motor running, no nothing." And he was like, "Yeah, I wasn't crazy about my interview the first time." So we redid his interview there. So yeah, Wednesday's great.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. I was actually just with him a couple weeks ago, so it's funny that we're having this discussion right now. But what an amazing, talented, just fun guy to just hang with.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, and I hope to do more stuff with him too in the future. Connected there.
Yeah, but I do just want to once more before I officially wrap this up, is just say thank you, and I'll definitely be in touch with you, and I'll let you know when this drops, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to share it. And yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a fun chat. I love the lightning round questions and everything. That was different.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun with those. The first person to do it was Britt Lightning from Vixen, so that's why we call it the
Okay.
lightning round.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. No, that was a great touch. A lot of great questions too. So I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right.
All right,
Awesome, man. We'll be in touch.
absolutely.